Are you all over in the States?
I am actually in Utah right now, but I'm in California. I sort of live in DC. How about Abby, Mandy?
I'm in Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay.
Oh, my whole family.
And I was so concerned because it said 9 p.m. and I thought, oh my God, that's like 4 o'clock in the morning. I had to let Google tell me what time it was.
You're fine. Awesome.
I'm New York.
Oh, cool. And Jane, how about you?
I'm in France, actually.
Oh, wow. It's truly international group here. We're so excited to talk a little bit about adult crime fiction today. And I think we're live, so I hope everybody can hear us. My name is Isvari Maranwe. I'm just the moderator today. I'm as excited as you are to hear from our amazing panelists. We have Jane Jesmond, Abby Collette, and Mandy McHugh. I am so excited. And I want to give them a little brief moment to introduce themselves, and then we're going to jump straight into a bunch of amazing questions. And if you have any questions along the way you want asked, please drop them in the comments, and we will try to get to as many of them as we can in the end. And I'm sure there will be tons. So Jane, if you want to start us off, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you write, and any books you want to plug right now.
Okay, well, my name's Jane Jesmond, as you've already heard, and I live in France. I had my first novel, a thriller, published last year, the end of last year. I happened, quite strangely, to have a copy of it here with me. It's called On the Edge, and set in Cornwall. I won't say too much about it because I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't read it. But if I tell you, it starts off in the middle of the night in a storm with an unconscious and drugged and dreaming figure hanging from a lighthouse while the rope that holds her up slowly frays. Mm-hmm. That will probably give you a taste of what the book is like.
That's such a killer starting. Wow, that sounds amazing.
Dark and stormy night. Yeah,
exactly. But with a twist. Abby, if you want to share your story next, what it's about, or like what your most recent work is, and then a little bit more about your author career in general.
Okay, well, I'm Abby Collette. Some people may know me as Abby Vandiver. And now, soon, I will be also writing as Kay Bentley. I have a book coming out in August. So these are my ones that have came out recently, November and January, and then that one comes out in August. I write... I always say I kill people. I mostly write cozy mysteries, though, so I kill them in a nice way, in a humorous way. And I have 2 series out now. Ice Cream Parlor Mystery, that's the 3rd book, the yellow one. And then Body and Soul Food. It's a soul food and book shop put together, and it's ran by a pair of fraternal twins. And then I kind of took a skip out of crime and thrillers, and I did a woman's fiction, but there's always a little mystery to everything I write. That's the one that will come out in August. It's called Where Wild Peaches Grow. And what else? That's it about me.
That's amazing. No, I love how much it can be a huge difference between different like sort of subgenres of adult crime. You have cozy mysteries, you have this like person hanging from a lighthouse by a fraying thread. Of course, there's psychological thrillers. Mandy, what do you write, and what are you up to these days, and what's your author career like?
Well, I'm Mandy McHugh. I'm from New York. My debut thriller came out. It's a domestic suspense. It came out in February. It's called Chloe Cates is Missing. I just happened to have a copy too. And that one is basically a mommy blogger, momager, kind of goes crazy and turns her daughter into a YouTube star, and then in the morning of the big shoot, her daughter goes missing. And she has the mother has a history with the detective who's charged with the case, and it all unravels in the course of like a day. So that came out in February, and I'm currently finishing up my edits for my 2nd book, which will come out early next year, which is mostly a straight thriller of it's called Play the Fool. And it's about a woman who's supposed to take over her company when her father dies, and instead he gives it to her husband, who runs it into the ground. So she decides to murder him, but somebody beats her to it and tries to bring it.
I love those books where someone beats someone to a murder. I just love it. That's like my favorite trope in human existence, maybe. That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
That's great. So cool to have all of you here. I have a bunch of questions I'm so curious about and want to talk to you, but just to get started, I would love to know why crime, especially like Abby, you write other things as well. So what drew you all to adult crime? And Abby, if you want to start us off, what drew you to crime, and then like why did you leave, or are you sort of leaving? You do both now? Why, sort of what inspired you?
No, I definitely don't want to leave crime. So no, I even edited this anthology that has 20 crime stories
Oh
in
wow.
it.
Very
Midnight Hour. It's like, give me more, give me more. No, I just would like to try my hand at different things. I know I can't do romance because I blush if I write a scene, so I'm sure I could never do that. And I just thought, what else can I do? But I like crime because I love mystery, a good mystery. And more than likely when there's a mystery, there's a body involved, so you kind of have to go down that alleyway in order to have some intrigue. There are great books that are written about art heists and different robberies or things like that, but a dead body just always piques people's interest. And I have been a Forensic Files 48-hour kind of girl forever, and I just like the intrigue of it. And I'd like to write right now. As I said, I write fuzzy, nice murder. But I'd like to write something a little edgier and a little darker. So we'll see how that goes.
That sounds amazing. So, Mandy, I think with what Abby was saying just about how you have a dead body really ups the stakes. Do you sort of agree with that? Do you like thrillers that are more psychological? I feel like Chloe Cates is Missing is pretty different from like a cozy mystery. It's like very suspenseful, very like almost you rush through the story. You're like you can't put it down. It's not a comfortable book in the same way. Is that sort of what inspires you to write? Is it a specific feeling, or is it the same sort of, hey, sort of, we haven't upped the stakes here, we need a plot twist? What inspires you?
Well, for Chloe Cates, I guess all of my books are different. I start pulling from different inspirations. For Chloe Cates, it was really action forward for me compared to some of my other things that are like character driven. I love a good dead body. Can't really beat it, especially you start off with a bang. I was talking with my friend earlier about how it's crazy that I haven't been investigated by the NSA for my Google search history. Like, how many poisons do you have, and how long does it take to die? But
exactly. Go to the library. They can't figure it.
Exactly. Go to Tor from a library computer. I know these things.
I think I probably started watching Unsolved Mysteries as a child way before I should have. And I actually started writing in the horror genre, and I still love horror. Like a good haunting or possession, like that haunted house, give it all to me. But I love the mystery surrounding a dead body and then the procedure to try and unravel the mystery, especially with Chloe Cates.
Yeah, no, that sounds amazing. So, Jane, I feel like with that beginning, you seem to also be a very action-oriented writer, but are you plot-driven? Are you more character-driven? I love that you brought that up, Mandy. Maybe you can also tell our audience just a little bit about the differences between books that are plot-driven and books that are character-driven.
For me, when I start, for me, yeah, okay,
yeah, yeah.
I would just say when I started writing, I never thought I would write crime. I think I thought I might write something fairly deep and meaningful, but I can't resist throwing my characters into danger and seeing how they react. And there's just nothing I love more than writing a big suspenseful action sequence, chase across the moors, hiding down a mine, all that sort of stuff. But having said all that, I would say I definitely start off with the characters. They're far more important to me than the plot. We hear a lot about plot, character, but the plot is just what the characters do and how they react to the odd bit of external stuff that comes in. And if they don't, if the way they act isn't true to them, I don't think the reader engages with the action at all. So for me, even though I write thrillers, and even though they're fairly action thrillers, it's the characters who come first every time.
Yeah.
You know, that's a fascinating take. I read a lot of Tana French, and a quote she said once really stuck with me. And it was basically, and I'm totally misquoting this, about how, why do you have to choose between both, right? Like, you can write a really good crime book with a lot of action, but you still have it literary. It should still be high quality words and high quality characters. So I love that description. So since we've talked a lot about suspense and what drew you to writing crime novels, and it's all this suspense and this action, there's a dead body. How do you write a good suspenseful scene? Because I feel like we see a lot of authors, maybe that's like the big critique, or that's where they miss the mark. They have a good plot twist, maybe they have a good idea or premise, but they're trying to create that like fear or that movement in your own mind as a reader. So Jane, maybe if you want to start us off, what do you think is sort of, how do you sort of write that scene? Because you sort of described that scene, this woman, she's hanging from by a thread. Like, how do you get that idea, and then how do you deliver on it? How do you create that feeling?
I think the key part of a suspenseful scene is that the stakes have to be high. I mean, obviously, you know, the world being taken over by madmen or death are quite high stakes, but equally it can just be something that matters very much to your main character, to your protagonist. So that's for me the most important thing. And then I think it's a combination of, okay, for me, fast-paced action, but nevertheless lots of sensual physical detail that drags the reader, that hooks the reader, engages the reader into the scene. It has to have a really strong reality and a lot of detail, a lot of very specific detail, I think, for big action scenes, big suspense scenes to work.
Yeah, no, that sounds, you know what, that makes so much sense. And when you're writing, I feel like sometimes you have to strike that balance, right? Because you want a lot to happen, but if too much happens, then you're not investing in each moment as a reader.
Yeah.
So, Mandy, I also think, sort of jumping off of that, like, what has inspired you to create like such a creative storyline leading up to, and you know, sort of no spoilers, but like everything that happens, like this is a premise that sells itself on the premise. So how important is that part, the premise, and then how do you like deliver on that to make sure that that suspense, that movement from even like the original back sort of, you carry through? So how do you do that? Because that's something I know I struggle with.
I mean, fingers crossed I carry through. For me, it's I start with this like raw idea, and Chloe Cates is actually the fastest draft I've ever done. I finished my first draft in less than a month. And it just came at, like, I had this one solid idea of a detective and a woman with this tangled history. And then I was up very late with my daughter at the time, and then my son, and then I was just like twirling this idea around watching Dance Moms, and I'm like, we have such a social media driven culture, and there's so much pressure to look a certain way and be a certain way and be on and be happy all the time. And it kind of transformed into one of my main characters, Jennifer's personality, where she's obsessed with proving that she's worth all of her friends and her families and everybody else's attention. And she just wants to do that in the shape of making her daughter famous. And she loses touch with everything around her, basically. And that snowballs quite dramatically. But I would say that most of my suspense came through revisions. What I started with and where I ended up is like, they were like two completely different stories. So sometimes when you have that like suspenseful moment, it's not just like this brief flash in the pan. It takes a lot of rewrites to get there. So for me, it's hoping that I'm getting from A to B in maybe not a straight line, but like a Jeremy bear me kind of situation that just eventually evens out and keeps tension.
No, that's fascinating and makes me feel a lot better about my haphazard writing process. So great.
I'm so glad.
It's awesome. I feel like we hear, like you were talking as well about like this idea for a character and for their background almost came first, and then you had this idea for the plot that related to it. Abby, I feel like this may even be more important in cozy mysteries. I've been starting to read a few more cozy mysteries lately because it was not sort of a genre I read a lot in the past. I've noticed it's almost more character driven. You talk about like not necessarily like writing romance, but I feel like there's somehow like commonalities to me as I read cozy mysteries and romance, like the arc of the story and how character driven it is, and how you follow their story across many different mysteries in the series. So how is that sort of how you write? Do you have the character idea first, or do you have the mystery idea first? And how do you carry that suspense through while still, you know, it's sort of being a cozy mystery, which is a very different genre almost. So tell us a little bit about that.
So in a cozy mystery, the plot is already given. You know, the plot is someone gets murdered and you got to find out who done it. So I never go in with like, what's my plot? I always go in with what are my characters going to do about this? Who gets killed? Who's the killer? And, you know, and usually cozy mysteries are a series. So it's the same amateur sleuth each time. So, and I kind of think they're, I don't know that I see so much the difference, because you have a plot, whatever genre you're writing in. You know, I always teach the narrative arc. You got to, you know, do that little bit and go up that roller coaster and reach a climax. Whatever that is, every genre has what that story is supposed to be. And so I always worry about the suspense, because even in cozies, I got to keep people turning the page, you know, and there's got to be something there. Conflict, tension, suspense, probably, you know, kind of all the same kind of thing. And you got to figure out, how do I do that? And I think one way to do that is you have to pose a question, not actually literally, but you pose a question to your reader that makes them continue to read to find out the answer. You know, that suspense. It's like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? So I was just reading this book the other day, The Confessions of Matthew Strong. I think it's on pre-order still, and they asked me to do a blurb. And in the beginning, he tells you exactly what happens at the end. This person gets abducted. So you already knew, you know, it's not like it's building up to that. But then you start to read, and then goes back like 6 months or something, and starts, and you're thinking, well, when am I going to get to the abduction? So you keep reading, because, you know, that's the suspense he set up. And when I finally got to the suspense, I covered my eyes. I go, I can't read this. This is going to be terrible, because you knew all the things that these people were doing and had done, and they built it up. So I think that's the way you build suspense. And I teach that too. All stories should have a question. It should be a story question. You know, if I'm writing mystery, the story question is who done it, and by the end of the story I have to answer that, and each scene has a question, and so your reader is going to look for those answers that you have, you know, woven right into whatever your story is, whatever you're seeing. It's something that they want to find out, and that suspense. I read once that Alfred Hitchcock said, to create suspense, you let the reader know that there's a bomb under the table. He probably said movie, but I'm saying reader. Put a bomb under the table, but no one in the book knows that bomb is there. You know, it's a ticking bomb. So your reader is like, oh my God, they need to get out of there. I know what's going on. So give your reader a little bit more information than the people, the characters in your book, and you got suspense then. But every time I feel like I can't do it, every time I worry about it. So it's, you know, I don't think it's an easy thing to do. So kudos to you two for getting that started.
Would you say that your chapters are generally longer or shorter?
Short. My chapters are always short, because my idea is that people read when they can, right? It's not a lot of people that can sit and read 3 or 4 hours, you know, at a time, read a book like I used to do when I was little. You know, you spend your days in the summertime. So people always say, I want to, you know, while I'm commuting to work or while the rice is boiling, I'm just going to read a quick chapter. And if it's too long, they'll start looking. I don't want people to stop reading to figure out, well, can I get this in? How much longer do I have to go? You know, they'll flip through the pages. So I always write short chapters, 1,500 to 2,000 words. And that way you can make it. And then you can even say, oh, I'll just read one more, you know? So,
yep.
Yeah, that's amazing. Also, I'm probably outing myself as a very, very toxic reader, but I definitely still just like start reading a book and then go to bed at 2 a.m., much to everyone else's chagrin. And I feel like short chapters, you make my life harder, Abby, because there's like so much suspense. I know I'm not going to stop, and then I'm always in the climax. So my husband jokes about it. He's like, you're in the climax, you open the book. I'm like, yes, that's how authors write these days. What do you want me to do? So yeah, that's awesome though. So kind of jumping off of that, I would love to know, Abby, like, how do you write a good plot twist? Because you really have to think about how to make sure your books pay off. Like you said, there's sort of a genre convention, so it almost gets harder to make sure that the reader feels this wasn't cliche, this was a new book, this was something I read and enjoyed and followed through on. How do you do that? Is that like a big deal for you? Does it reveal yourself to you as you go along? How do you do it and nail it every time?
I struggle. I write down. So I keep notebooks. I am a pantser. So I just write off the seat of my pants. I don't do revisions and drafts. I just write, and I don't write in order. So I'll have always chapter 1, and then my next chapter I write is chapter next, because there's no telling where in the book that might go, you know? So, but subplots, when I get this notebook, I'll write, or I use subplots, but for twist, I write up at the top in the margin in all caps, very large, I need a twist. I always say this to myself. It's like, what can I do for a twist? And then every time, I don't care how many times I've written books, I go and look up a plot twist on Google. Google, what's a plot twist? It tells me the same thing it told me before, but it's like, it gives me another idea. Someone is something that they don't purport to be. You know, you want these something, you know, it's a time constraint on there, and the time is up, you know, and that's a plot twist, or it doesn't appear to be what it is. So I try to keep those things in my head, but you do have to make them new and fresh, you know. So for me, it's very hard to do plot twists. I always seem to come up with them, and people enjoy them. But while I'm sitting here, and it only takes me, like Mandy, it only takes me about 3 weeks to write a book if I actually sit and do it.
Wow.
But
That's it. This is the wrong conversation. Now I just need to talk about how the heck you write so quickly. If I could do that, I would. That's the thing.
Nope.
This is why you're always successful authors. Oh my gosh, 3 weeks. Oh my god,
I think it's harder for plot twists now, because I feel like after Gone Girl, everybody started looking for the big twist, and it became a thing. Like, where if it's not there, then the book is boring, or it didn't pay off. So you were like constantly competing with this idea of, I need the next big twist, but it's not just the next big twist. I also need to have another one. So now you're seeing like plot twist times 2 in every book. So it's a challenge to write a successful plot twist.
It is, and I think even though, you know, they obviously have to be completely unexpected when they happen. Nevertheless, you have to put the seeds of them in beforehand. Exactly. They can't just come out of nowhere, otherwise the reader feels cheated.
Exactly.
I try when I'm working with my characters for each of them to have a secret.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Just when I'm working and thinking about them, each of them has a secret, and I find that quite useful at times when I'm looking for a plot twist.
Yeah, and Agatha Christie has done a great job of it. So she always has all these other characters that you think, you know, is the culprit, but they have a completely different agenda for the reason that they did these things. So that's a good way to do a plot twist, because just like Jane said, you know, they have a secret, they have a different agenda, and then when it's revealed, that's a plot twist. So that's an easy way to do it, but still, you know, it's hard coming up with secrets. How many different secrets can you have? So it's always a challenge. You know, I always tell students when I'm teaching a class, the first thing I say is, writing is hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely is.
But it's fun.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, it is fun.
It's so fun.
Yeah, you get to kill people. So that's fun. And I used to be a lawyer, so I always say I'd rather write about murderers than defend them. So that is
definitely true. I think so anyway. So Mandy, when you were sort of talking about, you know, it can be very difficult to write a plot twist, and you have to keep up with this new trend all the time. I feel like there's definitely that pressure to feel like you need to be like, when people talk about you in the New York Times or something, they need to be able to say, look at this really cool plot twist. But I almost feel like sometimes with the payoff comes from the fact you care about the characters, even if it's a plot twist you've seen a million times before. You're like, oh my God, that person's your father. Like, it can really have a huge payoff. If it's a plot twist we've all seen before, if you're really invested in the characters. So how do you sort of think about it? Did you come up with the twist before you wrote the book, or did it show itself to you through the characters? How did that happen for you?
through the characters. I'm also a pantser. Especially with Chloe Cates, I had no blueprint in mind when I started writing this one. I take notes as I go and like go back in revisions. But like when I first started the story, it was a completely different twist. And then I started writing the characters. Like I did not expect Jennifer to be as like cutthroat as she turned out to be. I thought she would be like very sympathetic and like somebody everybody could relate to, even like through her struggles of like new motherhood and not fitting in with anybody and trying to live in this social media world where she feels all this pressure. Like I'm like, she is going to be the one everybody likes. And it didn't turn out that way. In fact, most of my characters in this book are deplorable and nobody likes them at all. But I love a good unlikable character. But through their choices and the secrets that they made, it just kind of came organically. And then I just kind of fleshed it out.
So it was a plot twist for you for when you were writing it.
I love it. Even today, I was working on my revisions and I'm like strengthening the subplot. And I started with the first sentence and where I ended at the end of the page, I'm like, I did not see that coming. Wow. All right. We're going to go there.
I know, but it is one of the best bits when you're writing and the characters decide themselves that the scene is going in a completely different direction from the one you planned. And you just have to go with the flow and see where it takes you.
Is that what happened with you as well, Jane? Like, did you have the twist in mind when you started writing, or scenes in mind, or it just came as you developed the story?
It just came as I developed the story. And I mean, I often change my mind several times about who the guilty person or the murderer is. I'll write a version of it, and then I'll think, no, it's going to be somebody else. This is just a red herring, and that's quite fun because you end up with lots of different layers of different suspects. No, I just go with the flow, see where it takes me. With a premise and a character, and that's it.
I find that very fascinating. I read The Appeal, which you brought to mind, Abby, by your comment about lawyers. And I don't know if you've read the book, and no spoilers or anything, but in the end, they go through a whole bunch of potentials that could have happened and that could have been the case. And so that comes to mind with what you're saying, Jane, as well as both of you, Mandy and Abby, which is just that when you let the characters show you the way, like there could have been other people who could have killed this person, sort of like your new book, Mandy. So I think that's a really, really great way to write. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about main characters a little more, because I feel like there's a transition towards books with multiple main characters, and that can be very difficult to balance, but there's still a set number and usually a small number of main characters, if not just one. And usually in mysteries, there's usually a detective character, a character that's an audience insert or something like that. So I actually have a weird question, which is, how smart do the main characters have to be? And this sort of relates to the idea that you have to have, like you were saying, Abby, the readers should know there's a bomb, but the characters can't know there's a bomb. But then if your character's too dumb, people get frustrated. They're like, oh my God, there's a bomb, right? So how smart does the main character or main characters have to be in a good adult crime thriller? And Jane, if you want to just start us off, how smart are your main characters? And
not very. Not very. I mean, she doesn't really solve the crime. It sort of solves itself. But I think I think there are other qualities that are just as important, like determination to see it through. And obviously, if your life is being threatened, by somebody unknown, you're quite motivated to stick with it. So I guess it depends a bit on the sort of crime you're writing. Obviously, if you're writing a police procedural or something with a detective, then I think they probably do need a certain amount of smarts or an ability to go around to solve the problem. But that's not the sort of genre I'm writing.
And how do you make your character likable? So is it through their determination? Did you pick a trait when you're writing? You're like, hey, this character's determined. Readers are going to see their determination in this character. They're going to see themselves. How do you
I think that's a really good question. Which is a real cop-out answer.
I don't make mine likable.
No,
I was
do they have to be likable?
Right.
I don't think so.
Do they? I'm not sure.
Yes, they have to be likable. They have to have something to make the reader want
engage,
to root for them, to cheer for them, or care what happens to them. But there are good, unlikable characters.
Yes.
That are unlikable, but the reader likes them and they root for them and they want them to succeed.
Even though
They've got that like
For
endearing
me-
quote, like Ray Donovan or Thomas Shelby or Dean Winchester. You know, I'm just naming some of my favorite ones. Or Dexter. Like, why are we rooting for Dexter to murder all of these people?
Because he's likable. He's like a likable guy. He just kills people.
I don't know if he's likable, but you find something endearing about his actions, or like these morally gray characters who do bad things, but you're like, I could see myself in this situation. Right. So I don't think that they need to be necessarily likable.
No.
I like to kind of highlight the underbelly.
Yeah. I certainly don't think they have to be good. You know, I think that for me, I like a character who means well, but who is human and who has bad feelings about other people and who probably does maybe some mean things, especially to people who are even meaner than he or she is.
Well, is this the main character that's unlikable and mean? Or is
it in Mandy's book?
Yes, in mine.
Yes. Yeah. I think my main character is probably quite likable, actually. I copped out of it.
I think it was more like,
my main character.
Because go ahead. No, you go ahead, Abby.
I always try to make my main characters likable. Just, I try to make them normal, everyday people, and just, you can always talk to someone while you're standing in the grocery line, right? It's something there. You can say something, even if it's something you disagree about or you commiserate about. So, I try to give them that grocery store line kind of personality, and then I build on that. But for smarts, so I write books where a lot of cozies, the detective isn't as smart as the amateur sleuth. And I don't do that because this is that person's job. And I also have my character never run toward danger because that's just not a thing we want to do.
Oh my God, you're not really
you're not running.
So they want to solve this murder.
They're reasonable.
In every cozy mystery, I think maybe I have 7 series, cozy mystery series. They're always reluctant because who says, oh yeah, it's a murderer, I'm going to go over there and find them out and talk to them. You don't necessarily want to do that. Oh, you would do that. It's like those horror, because I can tell you're a horror fan. Yeah, like those horror fans. They always run toward it. What was that noise upstairs where there's no exit? Let me go and see.
Let me go and find out.
No, my characters don't do that. They're smart. They think that if it's somebody upstairs and there's dead bodies all around, I should probably go out the door. I don't care what I know it's death that's happening. So I try to make my characters reluctant, but something always pushes them in into the foray, and they have to into the fray, and they have to solve the murder. So I think that my characters are smart because they don't.
That sounds like they're unusually smart.
Seek out danger.
And I would say my characters aren't necessarily smart all the time, but they think that they're smart.
All right.
So you can see their thought process. Like they're really good in some like specific area. Like my detective isn't stupid, but she's definitely got blind spots. So she can't see the mistakes that she's making. And the same thing with the mother and the husband in my book too. So as long as they think that they're smart and you can follow their train of thought, you can get aggravated by their choices, but it's not like this blatantly Amelia Bedelia type character that's kind of fumbling through the murder.
So I've made all my characters. I don't know one main character that I have that doesn't have an advanced degree, but my mother used to say it's a difference in mother wit, which is common sense, and book smart. So all my characters are book smart, and sometimes they rely on that. But sometimes I think too that mine may be lacking sometimes in common sense because I am, and all my main characters are a little bit of me. None of them eat onions. Maybe I don't like onions. None of them eat seafood, and so it's always a part of me that I built into those characters. So sometimes I don't have common sense about stuff because my book knowledge kind of stuff get in the way. I'm thinking practical. Oh no, this should work like this because whatever, and it doesn't always go like that. So I try to make them smart. I give them enough degrees and things to make them smart. Who knows?
Yeah. So Matt, I would love to hear a little bit more about like the unlikability of your characters because I'm fascinated by this. I don't know that I've I feel like they're really unlikable. Like even for books, I've read a lot of books like that, but no, I'm like, everybody, you guys are all horrible people, right? It's kind of like you want to read it because you want to watch this train wreck happen. And I kind of personally, it was this great metaphor for social media itself. Like you have this premise that it was sort of playing out as well. Just you watch as sort of a reader, you're like, oh my God, I'm watching this train wreck happen because it's just fun to watch horrible people do horrible things. And so is that sort of like, was that sort of your intention? Did that motivate how you wrote the characters? You're like, hey, I need them. I think they're going to be unlikable now. Once you discover they're going to be unlikable, you made them more unlikable, or is it just sort of who they were? And is that sort of the vibe you were going for? Like people watching a train wreck happen, or were you hoping that readers would find something to identify with in your characters?
So I read, I said already that I thought Jennifer would be much more likable than she is. I'm only in a 2, actually. I had a kind of clear-cut idea in my head of like who the good and who the bad with some morally gray choices would be. It did not play out that way. And my first draft was actually, there was nothing redeemable about any of them. None of my characters were good. There was nothing that could connect them because you're like, I hate this person. Nobody would do this. So I had to really like rein myself in because I just get focused on highlighting these terrible choices and the ramifications without trying to find the redeeming qualities. I kind of like the endings where you're left thinking about your own choices and how it could apply outside of a literary world. And I know Jane said earlier that the genre can be something that's not meaningful or there's no like value to it. I don't think that's the words that you use, but something along those lines. And it bugs me about the genre because there's so many important themes that we look through and explore through these horrible characters. So I guess part of my characters being so unlikable is me just working through like my observations and seeing all these people putting perfect lives on Twitter and Instagram and what it was doing for like my own mental health and my own like emotional awareness, and then the impact it had on my kids. So breaking down things that I was noticing through their horrible choices. Keep making horrible choices.
Self-therapy. Oh, I'll never do that, but my character will.
Yeah. So Jane, if you can start us off with this next question, sort of related to that, and just start thinking about how books come to be and how when you write characters and you're putting a little bit of yourself in them, part of that is to capture the realism of what it means to be human. But beyond that, when you're writing a crime novel, I feel like there's so much research that goes into it, even down to like like if you write a cabin in the woods and it's a clock room mystery, still what does that cabin look like? How does a bullet go through a wall? Like all this crazy, like you guys were talking about this earlier, NSA level research. So how much research do you do, Jane, and how do you make your books realistic, and where's the line, like where you're like, hey, you know what, realistically this wouldn't happen, but hey, it makes for good fiction and that's what we're here for. So how do you decide that line, and how have you sort of built in the realism to your books?
Oh, I do an awful lot of research. The one of the key themes of On the Edge is climbing. The main protagonist is an expert rock climber. And I'm someone who would never go beyond the second rung on a stepladder. So I did a huge amount of research for that. I read lots of books written by climbers. I watched endless videos on YouTube about how to climb, how to do this, how to do that, until I've absorbed a huge amount of it. But I find, interestingly enough, that when I first write a scene that I've done a lot of research for, I need to write it, put it away, come back to it a couple of weeks later and remove half the research that's showing, so that it's much more underneath it. But I need that solid sense that I understand the climbing, that I know the places where my characters are, where they are. Not just how they look, but how they feel, how they smell. I don't necessarily need to visit them, but I need a really clear sense of how they're of that. So for me, the sort of physical side of it and the background knowledge side of it is really important, even if I think the reader won't necessarily know themselves. I think there's something about having that background, that depth of background, that gives the reader confidence in the world, in the characters you're describing. Having said that, I'm not the least bothered about reality when I'm writing. I mean, you know, we're writing crime and thrillers. I mean, everything has to be sort of vaguely possible, but I mean, nothing is realism. Gosh, if it's going to get in the way of a good story or a good plot twist or something like that, I don't care. On the Edges set in Cornwall. It's actually set in quite a specific part of Cornwall that I know really well, but geographically it's 100% incorrect.
Yeah.
You know, there's a big car chase in the middle of it, which, you know, goes from one bit to another. Well, it wouldn't happen like that. It's not real. But nevertheless, the sorts of places and the spirit of the place is true and is real. So yeah, research is really important. A sense of realism, a sense of concreteness is really important, but I can't be bothered with reality. Sorry.
No, that was such a wonderful answer. And sorry, I'm actually at a family reunion. There are like 13 people in this house, so I apologize. Yeah, but that's such an amazing answer, and I think that's sort of just. I feel like that's sort of how I write as well, so it makes total sense. I think it's almost like the atmosphere itself as a character, and you want to get it right. It's a very atmospheric book, but you know, within those bounds, anything can happen. So, Abby, what about you? I feel like a lot of your books are sort of set in a certain place because you have a series and you have a character you're building over time, and it sort of adds to the feeling you have when reading a book. It's something I want to like read under the covers, and I want to enjoy something, and I want to like be in that place and in that setting. So I feel like it might be very similar for you, but then also with the murders themselves and everything, how realistic is too realistic, and how do you do research for your books?
So yeah, a big thing with me is a sense of place. Sometimes, so when I do teach writing classes and people send me things and there's no feeling of place for me. So it feels like I'm reading the words and I'm just in a white space. You know, I don't go down that rabbit hole. I'm not there. So a sense of place is very important to me. And it's easier to do when you have a series because you can build on that than, you know, writing a standalone. You have to kind of put all that in there at that time. And so I do an excessive amount of research. And if it's not right, it makes me nervous. So I was just trying to write a book, a mystery book, and I wanted the person to OD, and on TV they always take that syringe and plunge it into their heart. So I wrote that, and then I decided, do I know what the name of that stuff is? And even though I don't write it in my book, I needed to know, you know. And then you don't ever put it in your heart. So I went back and I go, but it looks so good jabbing into the heart, you know, the way I wrote it. I go, but it's not true, and I can't say it. So I changed it to thigh because you have to put it in a muscle. And so, which the heart is a muscle, so I don't know what the problem is. I do, but lots of times I get it wrong. So I wrote one book that my character was driving down the street, down a highway, and I looked up the highway, and I got, you know, and I said, on this side, you could see this, and on the right side is the Savannah River. And somebody left in a review, probably a 1 or 2 star review. You can't see the Savannah River from that highway, you know. So I make it a point to try to get everything right. And then when I feel like I can't get it right for some reason, then I make up part of it. So my characters are in a place called, in that one book, where the Savannah River was wrong, they're in a place called Yosemite, Georgia. Mm-hmm. There is no such place as Yosemite. That way I'm at liberty to do whatever I want because it doesn't exist. But when I go to the real, I do. Once I wrote a book where my character was going to a hostel in Italy. And I actually on Google Earth went from they were going to take a train there. I went from the train and I walked down the street, you know, noticed the windows and the signs, and I incorporated that all in my book. Walked down the street that would take me from that train to the hostel to make it seem real, you know. And people say that I always feel like I'm there. So those things, but I even research things like names. I have to, the name has to feel right to me. So I research the name and then I say it out loud. So hard. Yeah. Then I do the last name and then I put it together and go, that doesn't sound. Yeah. So, I research everything, but I always say don't research too much. You know, if you research enough,
You're writing nonfiction.
yeah, to get your story together, and then you get to a point where you need to describe the iron. It's 1921, and you say, and they put the iron on, and you go, I know it didn't plug up, maybe, and they don't go and research the iron then, because you will go down your own rabbit hole. Just say research in all caps and maybe highlight it or something and go back.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then all my characters, like I say, have advanced degrees, which I know nothing about, so I have to look that up. I have to look up methods of murder. You know, I've done things like dry drowning and death by water intoxication. So I look.
I like dry drowning. It's one of my.
But I can't even watch a movie.
I like dry drowning.
I can't even watch a movie.
Dry drowning.
Yeah, I can't even watch a movie or anything without stopping. I went to watch Hamilton, but I saw it on TV. I had to pause it because I said, "Oh, first I got to look him up. I got to look up Hamilton and read the Wikipedia page before I can watch it." So yeah.
So Mandy, how much did you dive into like the world of social media for research for your book?
More than I should have.
Because I almost learned things, right? Like, so it was realistic in a dark, disturbing way. But so where did you draw the line? Where were you like, I'm throwing realism out, or were you like, I'm sticking to these things? And how much research did you do? Tell us about all those disturbing things.
So for social media, I felt like I already had like a really good grasp on it since I was spiraling down rabbit holes in the middle of the night anyway, looking at TikTok is a truly disturbing place sometimes if you don't have your feed curated. I mean, my friend will send me the strangest, and I'm like, who puts this on the internet? And then it has like 3 million views in 10 minutes. So for the social media aspect, I didn't feel like I was researching, more like brain rotting for some of it, but a lot of the technical side, like with hits and algorithms and SEO, all of that stuff I really looked into. And then because part of it is a pursuit, you know, the detective and investigation side of it, especially with shows like NCIS and CSI, there's this like tendency to want to like step by step the murder investigation, and I tried to avoid that, but like my notes for this book were very much like, this is what a forensic analysis would entail, this is what happens when you find a cell phone, you're looking for like, what's the step for fingerprints, because that's changed a lot over the years. And I'm like, I know that it's APHIS in the beginning, but I'm like, is it still called APHIS, because that show came out 25 years ago. So a lot of the technical stuff I had to look up. And then I watched a lot of Dance Moms, and the Kardashians. I've had people message me like, I love your book, it reminds me of this family that's on YouTube. And I'm like, I know them. I've seen them too.
Yeah. No, it's a very dark place. And I feel like I've learned so much about that in recent years, and mostly from fiction. So it's awesome when you get to educate people. So I know we have just 10 minutes remaining. I want to leave a little bit of time for questions, but I wanted to do a really quick, maybe 5-minute rapid fire. So I'm just going to go around and then keep going around, and call me out if I miss someone. But I just want to start with, who's your favorite crime author or book? Jane, if you want to get us off.
Okay, I've got so many, but I've picked one. And I'm going to say Dorothy Sayers, who is a real oldie, but there's no one who writes. She wrote the best detective ever.
Cool. Abby.
I'm going to say B.A. Paris. I love The Therapist. And I also want to say The Last Thing He Told Me, but I can't remember who wrote it. So sorry.
Oh, no, that's awesome. Book counts too. Mandy.
Joe Nesbo is my favorite. And then probably Jennifer Hillier, Jar of Hearts is like top 5 read for me. So good.
Awesome. And that way all of our listeners can go check those books and authors out as well. So what's your favorite plot twist? Now tell us the plot twist, but not what book it's from. So don't spoil the book. Abby, if you want to start us off.
A great plot twist. I can't think of one.
That's totally fine.
Come back to me. I'll think.
We'll come back to you. Mandy, how about your favorite?
She's not dead.
She's not dead. Love it. Jane, how about you?
The protagonist's sister turns out to be an animal.
Whoa.
What? That's amazing. Wow. Okay, that is definitely a plot twist. Abby, have you thought of one yet?
No? I'll think of it later.
How about you tell us one from one of your books, but you don't tell us which one, because you have so many.
That what? Tell you what?
Tell us one from your books, but don't tell us which one.
Oh, a plot twist?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's hard not to say what is going to happen.
Okay.
Yeah, when a plot twist comes.
No worries. If you think of something by the end, then share with us.
Okay. I mean, I know all of them, but I'd have to like tell you
No,
stuff
I know.
for
I
you
know.
to
Right,
see
no,
the
just
twist.
in a way that wouldn't spoil it. Otherwise, it's okay. Otherwise, it's okay. Okay, who's a character you really wanted to murder, but in a fun way? So I feel like this is a good one to start off with, Mandy. Queen of Unlikable.
Come back to me. I had an answer and I forgot it.
Okay.
In our own books, you mean, or in another book?
Any book ever where you're like, oh my God, I really want to just murder this character, but I want to write the murder. I want to make it creative. Jane.
Sherlock Holmes.
Love it.
That is a good one.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Oh
Abby, do you have one?
No. I'm not good at rapid fire.
Oh, that's totally fine. Mandy?
I want you to know the first character that came to mind when you asked this question was Pennywise. Where my mind is right now. I'm gonna default with the husband in Gone Girl, Nick.
Oh yes.
15 See you
I
later.
think that's,
I'm with you.
that's so cool.
That's a good one.
So cool. Yeah, I like that answer.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so what's your go-through way to push through writer's block? Abby, you have an answer for this?
Yeah, I have an answer for this one. I have writer's block on the other side. I don't believe in writer's block. I think that you just might get stuck on your story. So the best way to get unstuck for me, I take a walk, or I take a drive, or I read a good book.
Oh, that sounds great.
Love it.
Mandy, how about you? What's your way to unstick?
I read a lot, so sometimes that helps, or I do like a small section of dialogue, just edit and get out of my head. And if all else fails, I just go for a run, jogging, whatever you want to call it. I'm trying to work up to 10 miles by the end of the summer. So.
Oh, wow. That's impressive. Yeah. I sit on ice all day on my bed. That's what I do. So that's really impressive for me. It's almost as impressive as the whole writing a book in a month thing that Abby and Mandy have going on.
Yeah. That's not
Jane,
happening again.
How about you?
It's exactly the same. I don't actually believe in writer's block, but if I'm really stuck, I'll go for a walk. And sometimes I will just sit and write any old rubbish if I'm really, really stuck.
Yeah, well, that makes sense.
And write and see what happens.
Just push through. So what's your morning routine like? Jane, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I get out of bed, I put my dressing gown on, I make myself a pint mug of tea, I go upstairs, sit in front of the computer and start writing. And I only come downstairs to make myself more cups of tea until lunchtime.
That is super cool. Abby, your morning routine.
Unless there's 2 weeks left to my deadline, I get up and say I'm going to write, and that's about it.
Fun and honest. Mandy, how about your morning routine?
I get up, I run, I go get my coffee and come back and get my kids set up with their breakfast. And then I start whatever I'm working on right now because it's summer, thank God.
That is too productive for me. Okay. That's awesome. That's awesome. Very, very strong morning routines. What are you writing right now? Mandy, you want to start? I think you told us this in the beginning, but.
Yeah, I'm about 2 days away from finishing my first round of developmental edits on my second book.
Awesome.
I just sent off my 7th manuscript to my agent. So I'm looking forward to feedback for that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Jane, how about you? What are you writing right now?
I'm just finishing off the second book in the Jen Shaw series, and On the Edge is the first, and that'll be out next February.
So cool. So cool. Abby, how about you? What are you writing?
I'm working on 2 things, and I always tell people you can't do that. So I'm writing on a murder mystery with an unreliable narrator. And then I'm going to do one more women's fiction book. It has to do with the Tulsa race massacre in 1921. It's a dual timeline, and with the college student today. So, and they meet up.
Wow.
So 2 stories. Mm-hmm.
That sounds like a lot. That sounds hard to get your mind into those 2 stories, especially with that serious topic.
Well, I always say one story will take over. And right now the murder mystery is what's taking over. So I'll probably finish that one first.
That makes sense.
Did you watch Lovecraft Country?
No.
Oh, so
did I? I don't think I did. It sounds so familiar though. Why is that? Like what? Oh yes,
HBO show.
Yeah, my son kept telling me, because he said, "Is that the one who starts off with the Tulsa?"
Yeah.
Yeah, he keeps telling me, "Mom, you got to watch that one. It
It's
starts
so good.
there, and
Yeah.
the things that happen afterwards are all because of
Yep.
Oh, wow. And then Abby, you want to start us off with the last question, just last piece of advice for writers who want to become you. And you have so many books out, so much success. What's your advice?
My advice is always finish the book. You can change the book, you can edit it, you can make it better if you don't feel it's good, but you can't do any of those things, if you don't have something on the paper. But don't just put something on the paper, finish it. I talk to so many people who say, I've been working on this book for 7 years or 10 years or 5 years. Just finish it already. So whatever you do, finish your book.
Finish your books. Mandy, how about you?
Writing is always just keep writing, but I think what's been invaluable to me is the writing community on Twitter.
Yes.
Finding a group of people that you can talk to and bounce ideas off of, and have a beta reader, and just having that support. Yep. And I have a very fun group chat on the side that's based in like supernatural conventions, just to air out some ideas when I need like completely removed opinions. And to vent or bounce ideas off of, so you're not taking rejection personally, just to, have a good support system outside of your writing.
That's super important.
That sounds like such a good thing. And Jane?
I completely agree with what Abby and Mandy said. The only other thing I'd say is that there are an awful lot of books, there's an awful lot of online, how to write, how to do this, how to do that. Just remember that everybody's journey is a bit different, and that every writer writes differently. And so don't lose the sense of yourself as a writer. It can be very overwhelming sometimes.
Yes. Yeah. So that's all really, really good advice. I highly recommend, potential readers and writers take note of it. I know we have a couple questions, so I want to get to them. The first one's from Zaria. Thank you, Maddie, for popping that on the screen. Would you ever consider writing a YA crime novel, and what would the differences be? So does anyone have an answer? Does anyone want to start off answering this one?
Actually, Chloe Cates, when it came back for my book list review, was reviewed as a YA book. I love working with younger voices. I was obsessed with Pretty Little Liars when it came out, and I can't wait for the revival. So I would definitely write one. I think that the key difference is just the level of high stakes. You can't have like a teenager who's doing the same thing as your 36-year-old detective.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what would make it hard. So I don't know that I would, because I'm old and I have an old voice and old thoughts. And so I don't know if I could pull it off. That would be really a challenge for me. So yeah.
Jane?
Yeah, I feel the same way as Abby. I mean, when I was a young adult books didn't exist. So no, I'm afraid I'm sticking with the adult fiction.
Yeah.
Something I really love about YA is just it's so plot driven sometimes, and it's very fast paced, and it can be a really great way to even practice your skills with psychological thrillers almost, I feel. And I just want to get to the last question. I know we're at time, so really quickly, love what you were saying about Google search history. What's the weirdest thing you've researched that's even had you going, whoa, why am I searching for this?
Oh, good question.
I recently, I'm not sure this is that weird, but I recently had to research, I had to Google what would a body look like after 2 months, I think, in the water. The answers came up, all the text stuff, and I had to click on images and have a look.
That sounds very eerie and creepy.
Was it for the last manuscript I read? I had to Google how much of antifreeze could you potentially put into a whiskey to poison someone, and how long would it take to take effect?
Yeah.
Well, that is something. That is awesome. I feel like a really good mystery author is probably your best accessory for murder. Like, they'll have all these ideas. You can just kill someone in a creative way.
If you haven't read the Finley Donovan series by El Casimano, I highly recommend it. It is so realistic and hysterical. It's just so great.
And Abby, I guess you got the last word of the last question here. What is the weirdest thing you've researched?
I don't know. I'm sure it had to do with killing someone.
Yeah.
I always look for weird ways to kill someone. And 2 weird ways. that I thought I'd never be able to incorporate, and it was like, oh, so sad. So Isadora Duncan died because she used to always wear long scarves, and it got attached to a tire on the car, and it choked her to death. And I thought, I could never do that. That's just awful. And this one guy went through a pane of glass, and I have a fear of heights, and it was up high, and I guess he didn't realize that, or they didn't, whoever manufactured it didn't realize it was so thin or so able to break, and he went up against the glass and he just went through. So that gave me nightmares because I hate heights anyway, and so now if I'm up high, I never go close to a window because I think, what about if I could fall through? So but I did antifreeze in Killer Sunday. So I did look that up. So that was smiling when Mandy said that. I had to figure out, when you drink it, what happens and how long it takes you to die. So, you got to figure that around. But I find enjoyment in, I guess I should say, in figuring out those things. So
So thank you all so much for coming today. I feel like I learned so much. I feel like I need to improve my game 10 times. I'm sure our viewers and readers feel the same way. It's been such an honor to have all of you here. Huge shout out to Maddie for putting this panel together. And this
thank you, Maddie.
Thank you. ThrillerCon together. It's been like my 3rd year, and it's just incredible. So follow all the other sessions, follow all these amazing authors here. I'm sure there'll be links in the description. Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.